Okay, we're in Chapter 8 of Hilchos Teshuvah of the Rambam. We're in the middle of the second halacha, the second paragraph. And he has told us that the world to come is a place where only the soul is, not the body. And that follows from the fact that Chazal said explicitly there's no eating and drinking. And if you're there with the body and you're not eating and drinking, you're going to be in trouble. Even though, as I mentioned yesterday, Moses was on Mount Sinai 3 times for 40 days and 40 nights with a body without eating and drinking. And he wasn't in trouble. So it's not obvious that this has to be, but that's what the Rambam says. That's his position. So when it says that the tzaddikim are sitting, it means, it's a metaphorical expression. It means to say they're there without effort, without weariness. And when it says, Atrosehem biroshehem, now, let me try to explain those words. An Atorah is a crown. Rosh is a head. Be means in. But in the Tanakh, the phrase Atorah Berosh means someone's wearing a crown. Well, you don't wear a crown in your head. You wear a crown on your head. But it doesn't say Atorah al Harosh. It says Atorah Berosh. So you have to hear that in idiomatic Hebrew, in the Tanakh, it uses a base to mean on for crowns. Fine. That's a poetical use of the base for real people with real metal crowns. But now we're talking about a person who's only a soul and isn't the body at all. So now you have to ask, well, so we're not really describing crowns on heads because there aren't any heads. Now I have to re-ask the question, what's the base doing there? I think that's what the Rambam was doing. And he says, that when you say Atrosehem Biroshehem, that means to say the knowledge with which they know God, which is the reason why they merited living in the world to come. It is found with them. And this is their crown. And it says, with respect to Solomon, his mother gave him a crown. That doesn't mean she created a metal ornament to put on his skull. It means she taught him wisdom. And notice, by the way, the references to the mother. King David was his father. You might have thought he got it from there. Okay, fine. But he got it from his mother, something special. So, this is to say, like the phraseology that you have elsewhere, V'simchas olam al rosham, eternal joy is, now there it says, on their heads. But now, what would that mean? Joy on your head? The joy is not a physical thing that can be placed resting on your head. Rather, it's a state of mind, which with respect to the head, if you had a head at all, would be in your head, not on your head. So all of this is a way of talking about your internal state. It's not to be taken literally at all. So this, likewise, the crown that the sages were talking about here is his knowledge. And what does this mean when it says they're enjoying the shine of the presence of Hashem, the Shekhinah? It means they know and they understand from his essential existence. Wow, I don't think I registered this before. That which they cannot know when they are attached to a goof, a body. I'll explain this in a minute. Yeah, maybe very just my ignorance that I didn't put this in before. At any rate, the Rambam is committed here to saying that what goes into the world to come is only the Nephesh. He's going to explain the usage of the word Nephesh in the next halacha. So we'll see that in a minute. Now, when he says the das with which you know God, that's what entitles you to your position in the world to come. And I have made this remark before, I'm going to repeat it now briefly, that if you read those words out of context, which is very common in certain areas, take these 3 words out and say, here's his whole philosophy. You'd say, well, he sounds like a philosopher. Everything depends upon knowledge and understanding, and that's all there is. But when you read elsewhere, you find out that you cannot be qualified as having knowledge unless you act appropriately in terms of that knowledge. And you find out that there are certain elements of character that you must have. If you don't have them, you lose your share in the world to come. So it's not only a question of your actions, it's a question of the character that you have. All of these things, and Chapter 9, and Yis Hashem will come to, he says this in some detail. So one mustn't take these words out of context and simply think of it as pure philosophical, sort of a kind of Aristotelian idea. It is not. This is the core of a whole complex of being. And as I told you, what he says in the Guide of the Perplexed, that the only good is mental attachment to God. That means mental focus and experiential attachment to God, which has nothing to do with philosophy, because the philosophy that you know even when you're asleep. Your knowledge doesn't disappear when you're asleep. So one should take this out of context and make more out of it than it seems to be. Now, what I just caught myself on 2 minutes ago is this. There's a proposition that's discussed in Jewish sources. Is God inherently beyond understanding? Is it that there's a gap between creator and creature, such that a creature cannot grasp the nature of its creator? There are many places where that sounds like what's being said, and I'm not going to deny it, especially in Kabbalistic sources. It sounds like that's what's being said. Now, we saw, when we talked about Yediyah and Bechira, foreknowledge and free will, we saw that Maimonides says you can't describe God, therefore we don't say that he knows, and that's how you avoid the contradiction. You don't solve it, you avoid it, because you don't say that he knows, and that no one can grasp, etc., etc. That sounds, taken out of context, again, that it means that God is beyond all understanding. But, in the guide, Maimonides says, when Moses asks God, Hareini noas kvodecha, please show me your glory, Maimonides says the word kavod there, which we translate as glory, can be used to signify your essence, your essential nature. That's what he's asking for. And God said to him, no, you can't have that. And he said, no, you can't have that with the following words. Kilo yirani ha'adam v'chai. Man cannot see me and live. Now, if you're still awake or you need a coffee, you can think to yourself, wait a second. Moses asked to understand God's essence. And God said back to him, you can't know me and live. Doesn't that imply that after death he could? Yeah, it does imply that, actually. It says that. And when Maimonides explains there that the body is the barrier, the body is something which prevents the soul, it prevents the soul from achieving that knowledge. Being attached to the body has that effect on the soul. That's a long story. I'm not going to go into it now. But that implies that when it's not attached to the body, as when it gets into the world to come, then it could. Here, he almost says it literally. What does it mean when it says in the world to come, when we are only souls and not bodies, that we are enjoying the shine of Hashem's presence? Sheyodin umasigin me'amitas HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We know and we understand. Now, the key question here will be the letter Mem. From the essential nature of Hashem. What we cannot get while we are in this dark body. The only thing that needs further thought is the letter Mem. we know and understand from his essential nature. That could mean some yes and some no. But there's definitely a difference between being dead and being alive. When you die and your soul is disconnected, according to the Rambam, from the body, then you get some appreciation of his essential being, which you couldn't have in this world. Now, is the mem literal, meaning only 50%, not 100%? Or does it mean something else? I'm not sure. To tell you the truth, although I have read this before, I never put 2 and 2 before. It got 4. I didn't put 2 and 2 before at all. So I'm a little... I have to think and look at what the commentaries say on this. But this definitely confirms my idea that when you die, you get access to understanding God that you didn't get before. And I will just add one more thought. This idea that a creature cannot know its creator, I don't think it's obvious at all. Take that statement and turn it around. What it's really saying is the creator can't create a creature that knows him. That puts it in an even more questionable way. You're putting limitations on what the creator can create. Where would the limitations come from? The only limitations we know of where we won't affirm that God can do something, which, as I have pointed out, is not the same as denying he can do it. We won't affirm that he can do it, is where the thing that he wants to do is a contradiction. But this doesn't sound like a contradiction, that a creature should know its creator. Like, why not? So I think that this is at least strong evidence for what I said. Whether it goes the whole way that I want it to go or not, I don't know. Okay, we're together? Yeah.
So if I'm understanding it correctly, then there would be some things about God and his glory or essence that would be, I guess, as we're alive, like epistemically impossible, but metaphysically there's the chance that we could know him once we're dead. Like that's not being ruled out.
No, I'm surprised at you. Epistemically impossible, but metaphysically possible we can know him? Oh. Metaphysics isn't about knowledge. Metaphysics is...
I just said metaphysically possible, as in it's the information, or the information, but the... Never mind. Yeah.
Metaphysics isn't the right word to use for possible knowledge.
I guess you're right, yeah, there would be an issue there.
It's like, okay, yeah.
So, when Klal Israel got or at least heard the first 2 commandments, and they were like died and then came back to life and everything like that, could that have, did that elevate them in some sort of way? Like they knew a little bit more at that point?
Wow, you are saying something terrific. I mean, you're saying exactly what the Rambam says. He asked when they got the first 2 commandments, which in a certain sense they heard from God, as opposed to the last 8, according to some ways of explaining it, did they get some new knowledge or some new understanding? Maimonides in the guide, it's a difficult passage, but what he says, I checked this with Rabbi Matalon to check the Arabic, what he says is this: the first 2 pronouncements were spoken to Moses. The Jewish people heard God speaking to Moses. The Jewish people didn't hear the words even of the first 2. They heard no words at all. They only heard a voice. But the experience of hearing God speaking to Moses enabled them to grasp the truth of the first 2 commandments. The truth. And therefore, afterwards, the first 2 commandments for them weren't commands, do this or else, I'm ordering you to. That would like saying, I'm ordering you to believe that you're sitting at a table. Now, do that or else. Sorry, the game's over. I'm sitting at the table. I know I'm sitting at the table. That's as obvious to me as that I'm male rather than female. I mean, there's no way to think around that. Right? They appreciated that God exists and that God is the source of everything and nothing else has any power. They appreciated that through the experience of the prophecy. And Maimonides says this. So it's exactly what you say. From the experience of the prophet, they came to know the truth of these things. These 2 are commandments for other people, for later generations, they're commandments. For them who weren't there, they are commanded to know these things. But you don't command a person to know that which he already knows they can't escape. It's part of his very fabric. The command is completely superfluous. So that's exactly right what you're saying. It's exactly right. And it's a very deep, and I don't know if anybody else says that. That's the way he understands the Gemara in Makos. They heard them from the mouth of the most powerful. That's how he understands it. Yeah.
I mean, we were proposing that creators have certain limitation to approach and grasp the knowledge of Hashem, as long as it's I suppose a body, because as we were, if I'm understanding correctly, once the creature, the soul is also creation, or is not, it's creation.
Yes.
So when you die, that creation, that creature can actually get to know this.
Something's going wrong here. There are two problems here. What could stand as a barrier for us understanding Hashem? What could be in the way? So Maimonides says explicitly that as long as the soul is attached to the body, the soul is limited by the body. We know that. And on that condition, the soul can't grasp the nature of God because being in the body limits its ability to exercise its powers. That's one problem. After that problem goes away. But then there's a separate problem, which some people talk about, and that is a creature can't understand its creator. The soul is a creature also. The soul is a created thing. Right. So according to the idea that a creature inherently can't understand its creator, even the soul without the body can't understand God. That's where I'm stuck. I don't see why that should be. Why should we think there's a limit on the ability of the creator to create something which would understand him? I don't know any logic that would deliver that result. And I want that to be the case because even if you hold, like, let's say, the Kabbalistic sources, that you can't do it, that would be a position, not a logical necessity that no one could deny. It could be that way. It could be that way, that the creatures can't do it, but that's because that's the way he made them. He made them so that they can't do it because he wanted to make them that way. Not that it's logically necessary. Somebody says logically necessary, it puts all those other sources in doubt. I don't want that to be the case. Now, I'm prejudiced. Okay, I don't mind. So, but I don't know of any logic which says that a creator can't create a creature that would understand him. Why would there be that limitation on the ability of the creator? Yeah.
I'm confused. Why couldn't we say that God made us deliberately so we wouldn't understand him while we were alive?
I just said that.
But not like a limitation on him doing it, but rather he wants us.
I went through it quickly. I just said that I believe you can't back up the creator-creature gap with logic. And I said, if you give up logic to back it up, then you can fall back on a position which I think is perfectly acceptable. And that is, that's what God did because that's what he wanted to do. He wanted us not to be able to fully understand him. That's his decision, what kind of creation to make. And then the Kabbalists could be understood as saying, that's the way he made it. I mean, Maimonides could be understood as saying, he didn't make it that way, he made it the other way. That freedom you have when you give up logic to fill the gap. The minute you put logic in to fill the gap that a creature can't possibly understand its creator, then only Maimonides comes out to be wrong without any reason, and I don't see why that should be. So I'm sympathetic to what you're saying. Of course, if God decided to create it that way, just like, well, I'll leave that.
Why would that be giving up logic?
No. Let's see if I can explain this. Let's see if I can think of an example of how this works. I'll try an example. I haven't thought of, I haven't worked on this before, but let's take, for example, someone who says, like Maimonides says in one of the chapters of the guide, there are certain things that can't be changed into other things. Changed into means it's still the same, it's just different in some respects. And one example that he gives is a subject versus a quality. A box, a table, a star, a clod of earth, a human being, those things have qualities. Blue, square, kind, soluble, alive are qualities that things have. You can't change a box into square. A box is an entity that has qualities, and square is a quality. So they belong to different categories. And the idea of changing one into the other is inconceivable because if you move a box and somehow replace it with a quality, it isn't the box anymore. It's a different thing, utterly different thing, because of a different quality. Okay? That we understand. Now suppose somebody says, I hear you. There are different qualities of things, different categories, and you can't change one into the other. And I'm a physicist of 1850. We have that in our world. In our world, we have two different categories. One is matter, and the other is energy. And they're two different qualities, two different categories. Can't change one into the other, and change one into the other wouldn't be the same thing because they're two different qualities. In fact, when you talk about conservation laws, which has nothing to do with humpback whales, but in any experiment, we start a quantity of stuff. At the end, no matter what you do, the quantity will remain the same. There were two different conservation laws. Conservation of mass and conservation of energy. Because mass is mass and energy is energy. And it's interesting to know that nothing gets in and nothing gets out. You can make it shield it from any outside influences. You always have the same amount. And the claim was the amount of mass you put in is the amount of mass you get out. And the amount of energy you put in is the amount of energy you get out. That's what, and when you think that, well, so then this is just an inconceivability. But then comes Einstein. E equals mc squared. Excuse me, you can change mass into energy, and you can change energy into mass. We do that in the laboratory all the time. Right? So you discover that they're not really different categories. They're not separated by a categorical difference. So now, that's the difference that I'm talking about here. One thought is, creator and creature are two different categories, and that puts inevitable, insuperable limits to what they can do. Just like we don't say that God could make a box into square, we don't say that God could do that, because there's two different categories, there's no bridge between the categories. So we say you can't make energy into mass and mass into energy, and you can't create a creature that understands its creator because of two different categories, two different entities. That's one way of explaining the difference. That's what I call logic. Logic is guaranteeing that the creature can't understand the creator. That's a possible position. I think it's wrong. I think it's dead wrong. You can hear it as a position, but I think it's wrong. What's the alternative? Well, if we, in fact, like the Kabbalists say, can't understand our creator, it's because he decided to make us that way. Not because there was any logic that demands that a creature must be incapable of understanding its creator. No, he just decided to create us that. He could have created us differently, and he didn't. Maimonides says he did. So then it's a difference of just describing what the creator wanted to do. That, I think, is perfectly understandable, perfectly reasonable. I'm against the logic, filling the gap with logic. And the reason I'm against it because it means that Maimonides' position would be ruled out by logic. And I'm not willing to accept that if I don't have to. Okay, I hope it's clear now. Yeah, everybody together? Yeah.
I'm just seeing that somehow it seems to be that in that place, we are talking about Behira. Like that's the place in which you can actually see the conditions in which actually free will can happen. Like if there is when Hashem says to Moshe that he won't be able to live, he knows him entirely. Right?
Yeah.
And life is human life, like in its greatest expression is free will. No? So.
Yeah.
So is understanding Hashem something that just breaks free will and therefore?
Okay, so now let's try to clear this up. Yeah, roughly what I'm understanding from your question is that since free will is the meaning of life, it's the most important element in life. So we're in a condition where we can't understand Hashem, And we have free will, because we're a soul and a body. So that means that somehow having the crowning glory of what a human being is costs us that ability to understand him. I think this is an error that's sort of pushed on you by the way we talk, myself included. The most important things, the things that are absolute values, the things that are the highest possible expression, are the things you have in Olam Haba, in the world to come. Those are the highest things. There's no free will in the world to come. There's no free will. So free will can't be the highest essence of a human being. It can't be. Because you're not going to lose anything precious in the world to come. The world to come, you have everything that is precious. So free will is a means. It's a means to an end. It's only a means to an end. Because it doesn't survive in the world to come. In the world to come, there's no free will. The greatness that we have in this world is that we have free will, which enables us to get to that position in the world to come, which is the purpose of everything. But it's only a means. So we don't lose anything by going to the world to come. We don't lose anything at all. On the contrary, we only gain. Now, it's true, the price of free will is the attachment of the soul to the body. The attachment of the soul to the body means that we have a barrier between us and the knowledge of the Creator. That barrier is, at least temporarily, a loss, but it's a loss for this, like what we call in the Gemara Lashon, Yerida l'tzorech aliyah, is a descent for the sake of an ascent. Right? It's a loss which is necessary to achieve that ultimate knowledge of Hashem, which you couldn't achieve without free will. So it's an investment. But to see free will as somehow essential to the human being is a mistake. It's a mistake. It's essential to how the human being must operate in this preliminary status of the world until we get to the place where a real value is accomplished and realized.
I mean, I'm following, but perhaps should we still call that next stage a human being? I mean,
Oh, I don't mind. You don't want to call it human being.
I don't know. I'm asking.
But I don't mind. I don't mind if you don't change terminology. I don't mind. I'm perfectly all right. If you want to say human being, by definition, I'm talking Rambam talk now. Human being, by definition, is soul plus body. And when we get there, there's no body. So therefore, it's not really a human being anymore. I don't mind. But it's the purpose of the whole project. It's the ideal of the whole project. The world isn't better off when we're here rather than there, because here we have free will and there we don't. And if human beings aren't human beings, then you'll say human beings aren't the goal. The goal is souls. And the human being is a temporary phase that the soul goes through, and in order to achieve the highest possible value, which is a soul in the world to come. You just change your vocabulary, but you're not going to change any of the ideas. Okay, now the next halakha, the Rambam describes something which I've mentioned many times. Let's hear it in his words. This is terminology. Kol Nephesh ha'amura be'inyan zeh eina ha'neshama. The words Nephesh and Neshama have different meanings. And when we're talking about man and this world, the next world, everything else, the word Nephesh does not refer to the Neshama. Now, if you stop there, given your background, given the way we talk today, you think, oh, I hear that. The Neshama is much higher. Much higher. The Shama is pure spirituality. And the Nephesh is much lower. Yeah, okay, maybe it's part of the spirit of a person, but it's close to the body, and so, of course they're very different. The Rambam means the opposite of that. The exact opposite of that. He says, a Neshama, she'i tzricha l'guf. The Neshama is a necessity of the body. And that's not what the Nephesh is. The Nephesh is Suras HaNefesh Shehi Adeya Shehi Siga Haborik Kafi Kocha. I would say the fulfillment of the Nephesh is the knowledge with which the person has, with which he knows the Creator. So for the Rambam, the spiritual part of the person is the Nephesh, not the Neshama. And he says, elsewhere that the neshama is related to the verb to breathe, and therefore cows have neshamas. They breathe, don't they? So neshama is what we have in common with cows. And what's unique to human being is the nephesh. The whole Kabbalistic tradition uses the opposite vocabulary. So here, like other places, you have to just be sensitive to the fact that different sources use the words in different ways. You have to know what they mean. And there are many verses in the Tanakh which we use the word nephesh to refer to the soul, what we would call the soul. And the Rambam's Hebrew is typically biblical Hebrew, not Mishnaic Hebrew and not Talmudic Hebrew, but biblical Hebrew, and that's why I think he uses it this way. Okay, let's continue on with what he says. V'hisiga hadeos hanifrados v'shar hamasim. It's the knowledge which understands the creator and understands the elements in the creation. I explained this prior in the Mishnah Torah. It is the form of the human being. He creates nefesh binyan zeh. That's what's called nefesh in this context. Okay, we're together. Yeah, question.
It's just that I'm thinking about the pasuk from Bereshit and I want to ask because it seems to be. I mean, we know from that man was created from dust, right?
Dirt.
From dirt.
Yeah.
The other creatures were created from what?
Same thing.
Everything was created from dirt?
Well, it says to the Oretz, bring forth these creatures. The Oretz is ground.
Right.
But there, the Oretz did it, and here Kodesh Baruch Hu did it. He took from the dirt of the ground, and he made man's body. And the other creatures were only made from the earth. After that, Vayipach ba'avav nishmas chaim, he blew into his nostrils a breath of life. Nishmas chaim, a breath of life. Vayihila nefesh chaya, and became a living soul. That's the way the Rambam would translate it. What do you blow into someone's nostrils? What do you blow? Breath. So to say he blew into his nostrils a living soul, how'd you get the soul from blowing? Right? That's okay. He says this life, the world to come, is a life for which the idea of death is out of the category. Death is something which happens to the body. And there's no body there. So now, death for us is the separation of the body from the body and the soul. But the word death doesn't say that. In fact, for many people, the word death just means the body drops. So what the Rambam is saying is that that's basically right. Because when the separation takes place, the soul is not injured at all. The soul doesn't lose anything thereby. So if death means a loss of function, collapse, that really only applies to the body. You have a condition where the soul exists by itself, so then there's no, the concept of death doesn't apply. Okay, he quotes verses that use this. Okay. He says this is the greatest possible reward, the greatest possible good, and this is something that all the prophets desired. The word for desire in Hebrew is taiva, ta'ava. Hisavu kol hanavim. We're going to see this again here and chapter 9 as well. There's a whole stream of genuine Jewish sources that talk about taiva. And taiva is dangerous. It's dangerous. It's kind of independent root desire. I want it because I want it. And that's something which is dangerous. But you can't be against desire totally. That's not a possible position. The Rambam says because and we'll see, King David and the prophets all desired the world to come. But more than that, I don't remember the Rambam quoting this, but more than that, God is described as having desires. One verse says, Po eshev ki ivisiha, here I shall dwell because I have desired it. Because say the rabbinic sages, God desires the prayers of the righteous. Again, misaveh. So if God has ta'avot, has taivas can't be bad. They can be misused, but you can't be anti-taiva. That's a very, very important thing to keep in mind. We spoke about pleasure that way last week, and now I'm putting taiva on the list also. So you have to know when you hear negative evaluations or negative remarks about taiva, you have to understand this is a matter of creating the appropriate context and avoiding misuse, but not a creature without taivas is not the goal. It's not the ideal, I should say. Now he says, how many different names does the world to come have? And he has a whole long list, and the punishment, that there's no greater punishment, is that the soul should be cut off from the world to come. We said that before, and there are many names for that in the verses. Halacha Vav, Shema Taka Be'enecha Tovazu. Maybe you won't be impressed by this promise, the promise of life in the world to come. It'll be light in your eyes. B'tidme she'ein schar hamitzvos v'heyos ha'adam sholem b'darchei ha'emes elo liyoso ochel v'shose ma'acholos tovos uboil tzuros nos v'lovesh bigdei sheish v'rikma v'shor ba'ol eishein u'mishtamish b'klei kesef v'zohav v'devarim hadomim la'elu כמו שבדמים אלו הערביים, הטיפשים, האבילים והשטופים בזימה. I will translate this for you. Dreadfully politically incorrect. Too bad. Perhaps it'll be light in your eyes, and this great good. And it'll appear to you that real reward for doing mitzvahs and the person being complete and perfect in the ways of emes. So there are two things. Chapter 9 will repeat these two things over and over again. Doing mitzvahs is not enough. It's also to be complete and perfect in the ways of emes, whatever that means. The only real reward is that he should be able to eat and drink good foods and have intercourse with beautiful images of women and to dress in garments of silk, and rikma is a certain type of weaving, and he should live in houses of shane is ivory, and he should use vessels of silver and gold, and things like this means earthly, bodily pleasures, as the foolish, crooked Arabs who are sunk in voluptuousness believe. Because in Islam, the promise of reward is a physical promise. The straightforward physical promise in detail. 72 virgins and the whole thing. So that's their belief about their world to come, the reward that you get for the rest. It says, now he's speaking to Jews who grew growing up with Arabs, and then they say, oh, you have this speculative, imaginative idea which you can't even communicate. You can only give them an example. We have the real stuff. Come on. This is what a real man wants. You know that very well. You know, you're dreamy guys. You're not really being realistic. The real reward is what the Muslim word talks about. Shema, you'll think that way. However, he says, those who are knowledgeable, who are wise, and who are educated, know that all these things are without account, without significance, without real meaning, and hevel. There's no real satisfaction in them. The only reason why they attract us is because in this world we are compound. We have the soul and the body. And the body does desire these things. And the soul, as I've said before, by implication, the soul is affected by what the body wants. After all, if being connected to the body means the soul can't understand God, then the soul is being affected by the fact that it's connected to the body. In rabbinic literature, there's a lot of literature on this subject. So he says, even this, the idea of what you want, what attracts you, what motivates you, here these motivations are motivations that are dictated by the body. They're all matters of the necessities of the body. The soul doesn't desire them and doesn't treasure them. Of course, the soul understands that it wants to live together with the body. That's what it's commanded to do. That's what it's created to do. And if you need to eat, you need to drink, and you need certain other pleasures in order to make your life possible, because the body needs these things. So the soul's interested in it also, but sort of like you as a parent would be interested that your child should get a chance on the swing. You know, yeah, kids need to go on the swing. When you get to be 16, you won't be on the swing anymore, probably. I mean, there's some kids at 16 who are still 5 years old, but okay. But most kids, you know, are doing other things at the age of 16. Stupid things like motorcycle racing and other things like that, you know, bungee diving. But, so the soul will care for it because the body needs it, but not because it's attracted to those things. You know, it'd be like, just give you an example which is not 100% analogous, but you know, it's a Super Bowl. So you got tickets from a scalper at $750 a ticket. And you're sitting there, and it's the last 10 minutes of the game, and one team's behind by 5 points, and they've got the ball, and they're on the other team's 40-yard line, and there are 6 minutes to go. Will they make a touchdown? Won't they make a touchdown? The guy says, boy, I'm hungry. I'm going to get a hot dog. You're nuts. You're nuts. This is the climax of the game. You pay $750 to get there. You're going to get a hot dog? My stomach is growling. Don't talk to me about anything else. I'm getting a hot dog. He says, man, you're out of touch. Because the game is much more exciting, much more meaningful. You'll tell your grandchildren about the Super Bowl game. You won't tell them about the hot dog. and he's lost in the hot dog, right? This is just a gross. Now imagine Jonas Salk, who found the vaccine against polio, right? He did it by trying over 700 combinations. How much time did he invest in that? How much energy? How much dedication? After 500 failures, don't you think that people said to him, go drive a bus, do something? You're just sitting in his laboratory, failure after failure after failure after failure. You know, like you're not producing anything. You're wasting your life. And it could be that he wouldn't have found it. Only he would have piled up a record of false leads, which other people wouldn't have to follow. So he would have contributed to the ultimate discovery. But in the end, he discovered it. Do you think those criticisms rang with him? Maybe I am wasting my time. Maybe I should become a bus driver. I don't think so. He's trying to cure polio. You know, curing polio would be a gigantic achievement. So when your mind is involved, the hot dog doesn't attract you in the same way. Even if your mind's involved in football. No animal ever sat there in the bleachers staring at the ball and wondering who's going to win. They want meat. So this is the attitude that the Rambam has towards these bodily pleasures. They're something whose root is in the body, and the body wants them, and to a certain extent needs them for its survival and for its being in good condition. But the soul, as a soul, understanding the higher values, has no desire for it except in terms of its care for the body, and therefore its care for its embodied state. This is what he has against the idea that the only true reward would be a physical reward. But saying this, I think, acknowledges a kind of intellectual gap. We do acknowledge, I've said it to you, that we don't really understand what the world to come is like. We can't describe it in detail. Nothing that we experience in this world which is parallel to it, and that's a gap. And when you're trying to explain your position and enable people to identify with your position, it is a gap. It's a real gap, and it has to be addressed somehow. And the Rambam is addressing it in this way. Yeah.
Would there be any overlap in what the soul needs and what the body needs?
Would there be any overlap in what the soul needs and what the body needs? I'll tell you, I can't. I'm in a state of indecision. I can't think of any examples, but I can't think of a reason why not, because sometimes things can overlap accidentally. Someday we'll talk about the Yetzer Hara that's in the body, and it could overlap accidentally, but only accidentally. If you lock up all the people whose last names begin with K, because you don't like K, probably you'll lock up some criminals also. Some people who are criminals. Well, there are a lot of, there are millions of people who were last name K, and some of them are criminals. So you prevent crime by locking them all up, but only by accident. In that sense, not because you did something good or because it was valuable. You just happened to get it right by accident.